Otra excelente presentación. Y ahora quiero darle la palabra a Pedro Vasquez, quien es el representante internacional del Partido Voluntad Popular, cuyo líder, Leopoldo López, todos lo vimos cuando fue arrestado en el Estatua de Martí, en Caracas. Gabriel Vasquez from the Popular Will Party in Venezuela, whose leader, Leopoldo López, was arrested by the regime at the beginning of the Civic resistance movement in Venezuela. And Leopoldo López from his prison continues to be a guide and a leader for the pro-democracy forces in Venezuela. Pedro, welcome.
Thank you. Well, I want to start by thanking the Assembly of Cuban Resistance and Orlando for the opportunity, and also the Institute for Cuban and Cuban American Studies of the University of Miami for this opportunity to talk to you guys. And thank you all for being here. Yesterday, while we still working on the program, we came to a small meeting, and we have Ukrainian representatives, and we have Syrian and Cuban and Venezuelan. And we were talking about what we really want out of this. What are we looking for? And each of us have to come up with at least 3 demands that we think that we thought was important for our countries. And as each of us came out and sat and talked about what is good for Syria and what are we looking for in Venezuela or in Cuba and Ukraine, after we finished, we found out that we all have the same issues. That we all wanted the same, that what's happening in the world is not only happening around the corner, it's just down there in Venezuela, it's happening all the way to Ukraine, it's happening in Syria, it's happening in Cuba. And it's the violation of human rights. And we at this stage in Venezuela right now, we're in what they call a dialogue. And Voluntad Popular, the party of Leopoldo López, and students and other parties didn't agree to the dialogue, because we don't believe that we can sit and talk about the human rights. You don't talk to anybody about human rights. You don't get into a dialogue. You don't negotiate the human rights. And not with dictators. You don't do that. We have some preconditions, and the conditions were to free the political activism, like Leopoldo López, free the students, and get out of jail all the people that all they had was different thoughts, and all they had was their voice to go over what is happening. And that's the reason why Voluntad Popular and some of the other parties did not join this so-called dialogue. But I'm going to talk about three things here. And number one would be, where are we at right now? And number two, the 3 different points that we have that will make us go to the dialogue, and we'll so-called dialogue. And at the end, I know some of you guys want to know a little bit about Leopoldo and how he's doing, and I'm going to go over some details where he's at and how you can find out more about what's going on with Leopoldo. Okay? So the first thing is, after nearly 2 months of deadly protests in Venezuela, opposition leaders have agreed to sit down with Maduro. And governments for talks aimed at solving the crisis, what they call crisis. We know that after these talks at 1-something in the morning, one of the biggest violators of human rights is Maduro, and so is Cabello, started tweeting about how the opposition was completely lost and they will not give up. And we knew that. We knew that before they sat down. We also heard yesterday Maduro saying that regardless of votes, or regardless of any power, he will not give up the government. And we know that because it's been happening in Cuba for 50 years. It doesn't matter if you go to elections, you won't be elected. And if you win, you will not take over the government because we have the power, we have the guns, and we have the money. And this is happening in Venezuela. And that's where we're at now. At least 39 Venezuelans have died during violence crashes between protests and Maduro's security forces. Both sides blame one another for incitating the violence. Victims include students, security officers, and mistrust is still running high. We can find videos in Venezuela where we have the military, what they call security guard, being hurt during these protests and getting to the students and ask the students for help, and the students are helping them. We see how they ask the government forces to help the students, and they help them. Venezuela is changing, and we see how the people are changing. There is no, I won't say that the government is the biggest creator. We have just a group of people that have kidnapped our country. And the Venezuelans are awakening. And believe what I said, that we're awakening and this is not going to last long. And after that, we're going to go and help Cuba as it should be, as you guys are helping us now. Because we see you guys as a big 50 years old brother, and we're 15 years old. And we need your experience, we need your support, we need your guidance. You guys have all the tools that we need to be able to get Venezuela, and we really need your help. And these kind of forums are part of it. So thank you so much for being here. The three biggest issues that we're seeing is the right to freedom of peaceful assembly. States should explicitly affirm that protests are equally protected by the right to freedom of peaceful assembly. The state should explicitly recognize that individuals who are exercising their peaceful assembly rights continue to receive protection, even when other individuals within Crown commit acts of violence. What we're seeing now is that if you have a group of people that you want to go and have a protest, and you are going for freedom, and something happened during that process, then the leadership gets put in jail, as it happened to Leopoldo Lopez, and it shouldn't be right. Now we have something that is the new attack over the human rights, which is the criminalizing of the right of political activism, which is coming now. We see how you have a strong party as Voluntad Popular, and they are calling now for Voluntad Popular to be seized as a political party and go as a terrorism group. And that's going to be very bad, because everybody that does political activism in Venezuela that belongs to Voluntad Popular is going to be considered terrorists. And that's the new step that the government is taking. And it's happening to Voluntad Popular, and most likely it's going to happen to the other group if we don't do anything about that. This is considered the process of making activists appear as criminals or making protest actions illegal. These laws are used to criminalize previously lawful actions and allow the police to repress and control these actions. Trends toward reactions of free speech and peaceful assembly in Venezuela are deeply disturbing. It is particularly important in times of conflict or uncertainty that the voice of the people are able to inform decisions being contemplated by the government. So that's what's happening now, and you'll see it, and it's going to happen to Voluntad Popular in a few weeks, even though we're already working to go against that. You will see how they're going to be considering the opposition as terrorists. And finally, not least, the violation of human rights. We see that since February 12th in Venezuela, at least 39 people have died, dozens injured, hundreds arrested, and serious allegations of brutality, torture, and abuse committed by security forces. The government has also tolerated and collaborated with pro-government armed groups of civilians called colectivos, which, by the way, I found out that these have another names in another country, as we discussed yesterday, with the same procedures. In Syria, in Ukraine, and Cuba, and most likely in Iran. So this is not a Venezuelan group. This is something that is consistently, there is a group that gets armed by the government to do as they please without any repercussion to the government. So we're going to have that happening. And finally, we'll talk about Leopoldo Lopez. And I will invite all of you to go to a website, those that have access to freeleopoldo.com. And it's a website that gets updated with a daily basis, and you'll find out what is happening with Leopoldo. And Leopoldo is a prisoner of conscience. He was arrested without evidence based on allegations invented out of thin air at the directions of the government anxious to silence its opposition. No investigations, evidence, or due process to date. All evidence gathered has been controlled by the prosecution. In fact, the defense has proposed over 30 witnesses and 8 videos. They show that Leopoldo has nothing to do with what he was accused for, and all has been rejected. Leopoldo himself requested the opportunity to be heard by the judges, but his right to speak and defend himself was rejected. A strong majority of Venezuelans believe that Leopoldo is in prison as is unjust, according to the most recent IVAD. IVAD is a company that does surveys in Venezuela. And tracking poll says that 67% of the Venezuelans believe that Leopoldo is a political prisoner. The belief cuts across all segments, including the poorest, 60.4%, believe that Leopoldo is a political prisoner. And even then, among the ruling party own supporters, more than 47% believe that is to be true than believe is to be false. So 45% of the government people believe that he's a political prisoner. 47 believe that he is. The truth is that the government is worst enemy. The truth. That's his enemy. We have videos, we have pictures, we have people that can go back and say this is what's happening in Venezuela. But we know the Maduro regime is not going to accept it. So all we need is to continue to be united and work together to get all these regimes out of the world. It's not only in Venezuela. We're talking about different levels here, the level that Ukraine is, the level where we can find Iran and Syria and where Venezuela is. And the idea of this getting together, which is a great idea, is for all of us to work together and get this level up and try to create the awareness in the United States that this is happening around the corner, and they will need to work together to get democracy back in all these countries. So thank you.